collection of about 50 different businesses that are non-consumer, anywhere from investment banking, corporate banking, treasury management, insurance, asset management, international, and so forth.
Hi, I'm Sima. I'm co-founder and CEO of a security startup company called BlueBox, and we focus on securing data from mobile devices.
Terrific, thanks everybody. Just to quickly lay out the format, we're going to talk among the panelists first for, I would say, about 45 minutes or so at least, and then plan to open it up to questions. So if you have questions, if you could just hold off till that point, that'd be great. I think it'll be great to just first start by understanding the landscape and where we are today. So I think it would be terrific to hear a little bit about what are the current threats, what is different today perhaps than years past, what are we most worried about? So Elon, I wonder if you could start by maybe helping us understand what keeps you up at night in terms of the things that you're thinking about, how to protect your assets, et cetera.
Thank you. So we deal with high volume transactions. Our online channel, which we call CEO, the Commercial Electronic Office, transact about $1 trillion a month in terms of ACH and wires, and it's very important to protect those type of transactions. We're seeing fraudsters that are moving up that value chain, that are becoming extremely sophisticated, located in international geographical locations that are hard to prosecute, hard to pursue. Some of you, if you had a chance to read about the most recent bank case, $45 million from two Gulf state banks, from ATM network, very sophisticated, coordinated attacks. We see more and more of such things, and something that you have to be very, very diligent in ensuring that you're on top of your security. We're seeing a lot of movement by our customers who bring your own device to use mobile devices in their day-to-day functionality. They're looking to have the ability to bank with us through everything they do. Things like, it's kind of funny, we hear about people who are trying to bank with us using their Wii or using their Kindle. How do you protect from things like that? And as you move functionality, meaning you can start approving wires, you can start sending ACH using mobile devices, the vulnerabilities in those devices, the proliferation of those devices are creating challenges both from our secure information security as well as from our fraud detection capabilities. The move to the cloud is a big headache, and it's done by people who are trying to cut costs, who are trying to be moving and getting quick to market. Security is not a top concern generally, and we'll either we are attacked by things where people are having their application in the cloud, and then we get spear phishing as a result of hacking attempts and emails being compromised. Also within our business, there's a reluctance to move to the cloud because of lack of security or concern about where the data and international laws that are presenting challenges for us. And then, of course, you've all heard state-sponsored attacks are on the rise, specifically against critical infrastructure. Gotta say, denial of service attacks been a daily occurrence for us, and at this point they're just a nuisance. Just business as usual in many cases, but there's something more out there. It's certainly on top of mind for us.
Thanks, Elon. That's very helpful. I think you just mentioned denial of service attacks, and Matthew, I think that's something you've blogged a lot about recently. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about your experiences with that and where this is headed.
Sure. So I think it's important to understand when people talk about the cloud, first of all, that what people mean is very different in different cases. So in Wells Fargo's case, if they're talking about moving, the challenges of moving data to the cloud, that's a real challenge, and that's sort of a data layer of what cloud security is, or what cloud is, and that's what Amazon does a lot of. That's what Rackspace does a lot of. That's one realm of cloud. Another realm of cloud, which actually large financial institutions, Fortune 500 companies have been much more available of deploying are cloud applications, so at the application layer, so Salesforce, Google, things like that, those are cloud applications. It's very different than the data layer. So I think corporations have taken a while to move the data layer, but they move the application layer much more quickly. And what CloudFlare is building, and a couple of other companies are working on things like this, companies like Akamai, is we're really building the edge of the network. And so that's what previously had been occupied by companies that provided firewalls or load balancers or performance accelerators that existed up there. As those things shift from being OpEx from CapEx to OpEx, that's the edge layer is a really interesting place, I think. And each of those layers is going to move to the quote-unquote cloud at a different rate. If you're in front of that edge layer, what it ends up meaning is that you see a lot of the attacks that are out there. And so what we've been witnessing is just a much larger and larger scale set of attacks that individual companies are having to deal with. And the challenge is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to solve these challenges on premise because if you buy the biggest, baddest Cisco router you can buy, it's got a 100 gig port on it. The problem is that the largest denial of service attacks that we see are over 300 gigabits per second now, which is larger than any port on any core router. And so they can overwhelm just about any infrastructure that you have in place. It's really sad when you talk to large financial institutions and they say that we're under a significant denial of service attack, and what falls over is their load balancer. And so as that edge moves up to the cloud, increasingly cloud services have to be able to deal with these types of large attacks. And I think the interesting trend is going to be as the data layer and the application layer and the edge layer move up into the cloud services, what happens to security companies in general? And do security companies actually even exist in the future? Or do we all just buy Amazon, and Amazon then provides security services? And I'm actually deeply skeptical of the future of security as an individual standalone company. But I think it's interesting that the attacks are definitely growing larger, and it's very difficult for any company to deal with those attacks by themselves.
Shuman, any thoughts on the general climate and what threats you're most focused on?
So there are all kinds of new threats that people read about in the press for the first time that indicate a new attack vector or a new area in their network that they need to secure. But I think the overall macro trend that we see that's in common with all of these things is automation. So there's only so much damage that an individual can do. At the point that they figure out how to be able to take a manual attack and automate that using something like a botnet, they can make the attack that much more dangerous and that much more effective from their point of view. So what we're seeing is an escalation in the sophistication of these attacks. Attacks like man in the browser that allow not just an individual to be able to steal from a single person's bank account, but being able to steal from many different people's bank accounts simultaneously. Whenever you take any kind of software method and figure out a way to be able to automate it, that's the point at which you start to see that these attacks become something other than what they were before. So you can have something which is individually not that harmful, something that goes right past an intrusion detection system or an intrusion prevention system, because that in itself, like a login attempt, is completely benign. But as soon as you automate that, as soon as you have, say, millions of login attempts, that's something which is actually an attack vector. And it can be used to be able to test against credentials that have been leaked from other websites. So before, whenever you would read about a breach on a given website, the advice would be change your password on that website. But now the advice is change your password on every website where you've reused that same password, because you don't have to be targeted anymore in order to be affected by one of these breaches. Automation allows attackers to be able to target everyone simultaneously and discover those places where vulnerabilities are in common between sites.
Caleb, can you talk a little bit about the mobile security realm and what we should be thinking about there?
Sure. So, it's interesting. Mobile's got a lot of hype going around on security. Obviously, mobile's growing at a tremendous rate. Everyone knows that when you're looking at mobile devices, that's going to be the future, and that will be the future. And today, when everyone talks about what is our fear in mobile, why is mobile so insecure, what are we going to do about it, there's been a lot of different people trying to come up with a lot of different solutions. And ultimately, when you kind of look at the problem and you really, really look at what's going on in terms of mobile, is mobile more insecure? Is it less secure? What's the real issue? And it's kind of interesting is that it's one area in mobile that I think both users and security have clashed the hardest. You guys always know that security and usability and productivity have never really agreed, right? When you look at security and IT security, they're always getting in the way of doing things. But on desktops, on machines, on server, whatever, on your laptops, you can kind of ignore it, right? The thing runs, it may slow down your PC, but you still get what you need done. The problem is when it comes down to mobile, all of a sudden you can no longer ignore it. Because of the viewing point of it, because of the usability of security, they're taking all these security companies are taking old traditional security that worked on desktops and applied it to mobile. So what happens is it really gets in your way. It makes you non-productive. I want to go and download an attachment, open it up in a PDF editor, edit it, save it in Dropbox, share it with my coworkers. This is the power of mobile, and to users, it's amazing. But security has come along and said, wait a minute, we need to secure everything, so they block everything that goes on, and they say, you know what, we don't want you to do that, we need to throw yourself in this little tiny jail, and then all of a sudden you're like stuck, and you're like, this is a real big pain in the butt. So what is it that you guys do when you do it is, well, you go around it. So everyone says, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna find a way to do what I need to do on mobile in order to get what I need done. And actually, I think that's where you really start seeing it's not a threat of malware on mobile, it's not even a threat of attacks on mobile, it actually gets down to what mobile really, or security really needs to be, which is data security. It really is the users circumventing these security measures in order to get what they need done. So ultimately, what I start seeing as a future for security is that security in general, not just for mobile, but you're seeing a trend, which is that security has to be invisible. No longer is security going to be the guys that tell you no. They just can't do that. That world is changing. With cloud services, with mobile, with user-centric being the focus of it all, we just can't tell users you can't do things anymore. What's going to happen is security's got to step back, look at it, and say, you know what? How do we become invisible to the user, allow them to do the things that they need to do, at the same time do our risk management properly? So ultimately, I think not just with mobile, it really kind of starts with mobile because that's where the real pain point hit. But as you start seeing newer and newer security companies or services come along, their entire goal and job is going to become as invisible as possible to allow users to be productive. And hopefully security is someone that watches your back versus someone that blocks you all the time.
That's a good viewpoint, Caleb. So I think, based on what I'm hearing, it sounds pretty bad out there. I guess Matthew and others, what do you guys suggest? I'm a corporate officer. I'm trying to protect my organization's assets. What do I do?
I mean, I guess it's bad. There have been bad guys forever, and I actually think that in a lot of ways the solutions are getting easier. I'm less worried about automated attacks than Sherman because some level of security is statistics, and you're looking for abnormalities and deviations from the mean. And so I think what we're about to do is go through a great wave of consolidation in the web. If you think about the web goes through phases of dispersion and consolidation from its early history. So when the web starts, it's actually fairly consolidated. 5 universities scattered across the country, 1 network built it out. Then it disperses massively, almost every university in the world, a couple of organizations. Then as the web goes consumer, it actually consolidates substantially behind AOL and CompuServe and a couple of providers, and then the browser wars disperse it again. And I think what you're about to see in the web generally is a massive consolidation, largely driven by some of the challenges that individuals face trying to protect their own infrastructure. And that won't look all that different to you as web consumers. But again, I think what you'll see is a couple of large organizations with large networks end up running that edge of the network and using the data that they can gather across millions and millions of websites in order to better secure those websites. And so Amazon will be one of those. I think CloudFlare is likely to be one of those. A company like Akamai is likely to be one of those. And then the inevitable question is when someone like Google gets into the business, because they are the other one that runs the network that can do that. And there will be between 2 and 6 providers that provide those edge services. And those edge services actually will make securing the edge of your network substantially easier. Because security becomes the responsibility of the individual provider. And so while large financial institutions and other very high valuable targets will continue to have unique security challenges that they'll have to deal with because of the unique applications that they provide, I actually think that the security for the average company is about to go through a renaissance and become actually quite a bit easier for a lot of people to deploy, because it's going to inherently not be a product that you buy separate and apart from the underlying service that you're buying. It's something that's included in the underlying service that you're buying. So I'm actually a lot more optimistic than the rest of the crowd.
Shuman, any thoughts on steps for prevention or things to focus